topic of learning has been studied and researched for thousands of years. Most of the research has focused on pedagogy, the art and science of teaching children. More recently, researchers have developed the theory that adults and children learn differently. This concept grew in popularity in 1960 when a researcher, Malcolm Knowles, gave adult learning a name, Andragogy. Andragogy's literal translation is from the Greek, andra, adult, and agogos, leading. The original founder of this term was Alexander Knapp. He first used this word in 1833 to try to describe how he was instructing his pupils, who were young adults. The term came back into popularity in the 1920s in post-war Germany. This was a time when the country had to educate its adult population in order to rebuild the nation. German immigrants brought the terminology with them to the U.S. in the late 1920s, whereupon Knowles really coined the term and placed it firmly into history. To understand Knowles a little further, we should look briefly at his history. Malcolm Knowles was born August 24, 1913 in Montana. His father was a vet, and he moved the family to Florida, where Knowles graduated from Palm Beach High School in 1930. He furthered his education with a scholarship to Harvard and graduated in 1934 with a Bachelor of Arts degree. Bookending a stint in the Navy, he worked as the director of adult education at 2 YMCAs, the first in Boston, the second in Chicago. While in Chicago, he earned his Master's of Arts degree and eventually his Ph.D. from the University of Chicago. In 1959, he accepted a faculty position at Boston University, where he stayed for 14 years. He finished his last 4 years as an educator at North Carolina State University. Knowles passed in 1997 at his home in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Knowles summarized 6 key assumptions about adult learners that are the foundation of adult learning. His theory has evolved over time, whereas sometimes there are 4 assumptions noted. Most recently, there are 6 assumptions. These assumptions are self-concept of the learner, experience of the learner, readiness to learn, orientation to learn, the motivation to learn, and the need to know. Knowles' first assumption, self-concept, posits that as a person matures, they move from being dependent on others to being self-directed or independent. In adult learning, it is suggested that the learner is made to feel equal to others, and learning should be a joint venture between teacher and student. One key factor is that learning should be self-directed, meaning adult learners can participate in the diagnosis of their learning needs. Knowles' second assumption, experience, states that as a person matures, they gain vast experiences in multiple settings that assist in learning. These past experiences are strong factors in learning. In practice, it would be of benefit to an educator to gather feedback on the adult learner's previous experience so as to tailor the particular learning experience specifically to them. Knowles' third assumption is that an adult learner has to be ready to learn. The topic has to be relevant to them, their social setting, or situation in life, or has to have some meaning or purpose. People are ready to learn when they realize a need to learn something to cope with a life or work situation. Adults face many different life situations, such as marriage, having children, raising a family, and establishing a career, and each one of these items could create a need to learn. At the workplace, it could mean learning a new computer program or a conflict resolution style. In practice, this means you have to pay particular attention to the timing of learning. Make learning at logical points, such as the first week on the job or before a promotion. Secondly, group learners appropriately. People must be at the same learning stage for the topic to be relevant and necessary to them. In the assumption of orientation to learn, Knowles posits that people see learning as a means to developing a higher level of competence that allows them to fulfill their potential. Adult learners need to solve immediate problems and are less concerned with subject matter. They want to apply what they learn to living more effectively tomorrow. In practice, one idea is to base learning around the competency model, to allow learning in a step-by-step fashion. As an adult learner, the motivation to learn is more intrinsic than that of a child. A child has strong external motivators such as teachers. However, an adult has their own satisfaction and need to know, driving their motivation to learn. Adult learners with high motivation obviously relish learning and enjoy a broad and deep subject knowledge. Goal setting is key for adult learners to keep them motivated and engaged. A self-awareness of how much they learn encourages adult learners to continue in their learning journey. In the sixth assumption, need to know, Knowles states that the role of the teacher in adult learning is to lead the student into discovering what it is they want or need to know. Once this has been accomplished, the student will invest a significant amount of time and effort into researching and learning about a particular topic. Having described the 6 assumptions of andragogy, we will now examine its strengths. Flexible. The model of andragogy is flexible because it can be utilized as a whole or just in parts. For example, depending on who you are targeting in your adult learning setting, you could use 1, 3, or all 6 of the assumptions. Broad. Andragogy is able to cross many disciplines of adult learning. Andragogy has been described as a learning theory for the sciences all the way through to theology. It is very easy to adapt to any of the traditional disciplines. In addition, the learner is an integral part of this theory and therefore must be taken seriously, which goes deeper than purely having respect for the learner. This model is also compatible with other learning models, such as Bloom's taxonomy, and is therefore relevant to multiple teaching methods. Lastly, one other strength is that by working together, the student and teacher can tailor learning to be problem-based, such as one of the life or work problems described earlier, over content-based, such as theories. It has been said that the problem-based is far more important for adult learners. Knowles' theory of adult learning has been criticized by many, yet it has managed to be one of, if not, the most respected and utilized theories on adult learning throughout the last 40 years. Knowles himself acknowledged many of the criticisms and has renamed his theory to assumptions, trying to move back away from or ease the tension over calling his thoughts on andragogy a theory. The main body of literature critiquing andragogy is that it lacks fundamental characteristics of a science or theory because it cannot be measured. Moreover, many suggest that the assumptions should be documented as good practice, but not as a theory. One of the largest issues is that the only way to measure the effectiveness of the assumptions is through tests and grades, yet this is against andragogy's principles. Lastly, the question has been asked if these assumptions only relate to adults, but not also to children. Even though andragogy has been the major adult education theory for over 40 years, there has been very little research on the topic. In a study by Beda and Darkenwald in 1982, in which they asked teachers if their teaching style was different for adults and for children, the overwhelming response was that yes, obviously teaching adults was very different. When observing teacher behavior, these evaluators reported both groups were taught with similar methods, thus contradicting the teacher's responses. Other studies have found the success of andragogy to be inconclusive. The success has been hard to measure because of the lack of specified measurement tools. Reichman in 2000 stated that andragogy is the research on adult education and the actual educating of results, the practice. Miriam, 2001, states that research of andragogy has taken two routes. One, analyzing the origins of andragogy, and the other, critiquing the study. Miriam also stated that andragogy is one of the two pillars of adult learning, the other self-directed learning, and from the research has suggested that whether people agree or disagree with the assumptions, it has kept adult learning at the forefront of discussions, which can only improve adult learning in the long run. Lastly, Rochelle, in 2002, found comparing one study to another way too difficult and suggested 7 criteria for designing andragogy studies. These were to make sure participation is voluntary, participation is of the adult population, assessment is performance-based, objectives were determined in advance, satisfaction with the learning experience measured, research methods implemented, and an adult learning environment in place. There are multiple examples of andragogy in practice. As stated, one of the strengths of andragogy is that it is broad-ranging and therefore applicable across many disciplines. Adult education is important in many fields, especially in instances such as social work, where adults have to teach other adults how to be good parents or how to appropriately care for the elderly. In addition, in a totally different field, andragogy has been used by the church in writing sermons. The church is focused on preparing messages to adults in ways that are meaningful and timely to the adult learner. Once again, adults are teaching adults and need to find the best methods to do so. Lastly, andragogy is used extensively with adult learning in the workplace, alternatively known as professional development. All workplaces need to educate their employees about different topics relevant to the business, and much more focus has been placed on the delivery method specific to adult learners to enhance this professional development. The future of andragogy is one topic that many find incredibly interesting. Andragogy has been the staple of adult learning theories for the last 40 years. Although it has been heavily criticized, it is still being used in adult education. To continue its popularity, it must develop a way of measuring success and continued emphasis on good practices in adult education. With the knowledge economy upon us and a higher emphasis placed on technology, much training will be needed for the adult population, and a high emphasis will be placed on continued education and professional development.